Mom, look. Everyone's going to love me in my suit. My 8-year-old son Liam shouted from across our small bookstore, his face lighting up with pure joy as he carefully made his way between stacks of books. His almond-shaped eyes crinkled at the corners, beaming with excitement as he proudly showed off his tiny ring-bearer tuxedo. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the dusty bookshop windows, catching the happiness radiating from him. My heart swelled with love and protection as I watched him navigate around a towering display of bestsellers. "You look absolutely handsome, sweetheart," I said, forcing my smile to reach my eyes despite the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. Liam was born with Down syndrome, and though he was my entire universe, my parents had never fully accepted him, or me, for that matter. My name is Erica. I'm 35 years old and a single mother running this small bookstore that's become our sanctuary. When Liam was born and diagnosed with Down syndrome, my ex-husband couldn't handle it. He disappeared into the arms of another woman within months, leaving me to raise our beautiful son alone. I wouldn't change a thing about Liam. His extraordinary capacity for love and joy transforms everyone he meets. Everyone except my sister Julia and her picture-perfect family. "Couldn't you have fixed that before he was born?" Julia had once whispered harshly at a family dinner, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on the table as Liam took longer to finish his meal. "There are tests for these things, you know. There's nothing to fix. Liam is perfect exactly as he is," I'd responded through clenched teeth, my voice quiet but firm as I squeezed my son's hand under the table. Julia's wedding was approaching fast, and the only reason Liam and I had even been invited was because my mother Caroline had insisted for appearance's sake. Julia was marrying Matthew, the heir to one of the most successful investment firms in the city, and everything had to be flawless for her perfect day. The day before the wedding, during the rehearsal at the Grand Cathedral downtown, I sensed something was wrong. The bridesmaids clustered together in their designer dresses, throwing pitying glances at Liam as he practiced walking down the aisle with measured, careful steps that he'd been practicing for weeks. "Julia," I approached my sister during a break, my voice low and controlled despite the dread building inside me. "Is everything okay with Liam's role?" She barely glanced up from her phone. "Matthew's parents are concerned," she muttered dismissively. "They think a child with his condition will distract from the ceremony and ruin the wedding photos." The words hit me like ice water. "Excuse me?" My voice trembled as heat rushed to my face. She let out an exasperated sigh, finally looking up with cold eyes. "Look, Erica, it's awkward enough that you've always been different from the rest of us." A chill ran down my spine, leaving goosebumps in its wake. "Different? What exactly do you mean by that?" Julia turned to face me fully, her perfectly glossed lips curling into something almost like satisfaction. "Oh, please. Everyone knows you don't look anything like the rest of the family. Mom and Dad have always felt uncomfortable about it. You're too dark, your hair's too curly. You never fit in." Her words punched the air from my lungs. It was true that I never resembled my fair-skinned, blonde family. My olive complexion and curly hair stood out in every family photo, but I'd always attributed it to genetic variation, never questioning my place. "You're being absolutely ridiculous," I said, though I couldn't stop my voice from trembling as the weight of her words sank in. Julia crossed her arms across her designer dress, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Whatever. Just keep your disabled son out of the way tomorrow. He can sit with the venue staff during the ceremony." That night, as I tucked Liam into bed in our small apartment above the bookstore, he looked up at me with those beautiful eyes full of confusion and hurt. "Mom, why doesn't Aunt Julia like me? Did I do something wrong?" His voice was small, vulnerable in a way that broke my heart into pieces. I pulled him close against my chest, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, holding him tight as if I could shield him from the world's cruelty. "Oh, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Some people just don't know how to see how special and amazing you are. The other kids said I'm not a real cousin because I'm different, he whispered against my shoulder, his warm tears dampening my shirt. They said my face is wrong. My blood boiled with white-hot fury, but I forced myself to stay calm for Liam's sake, swallowing the rage that threatened to overflow. Listen to me, Liam. Family isn't about looking the same or having the same abilities. Real family is about love. And I love you more than anything in this entire universe. The next morning, we arrived early at the grand church. I'd spent extra time helping Liam dress in his little tuxedo, making sure his bow tie was straight, his hair neatly combed. He clutched the satin pillow for the rings with such pride, practicing his careful walk just as we'd rehearsed at home dozens of times. But everything shattered during the pre-ceremony photos on the church steps. The boy with Down syndrome cannot be in the family pictures, Diane, Matthew's mother, suddenly announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Her voice was refined but laced with disgust, as if Liam's mere presence contaminated the air around her. Liam's face crumpled, his shoulders slumping forward. But I'm the ring bearer, he protested quietly, his voice wavering as tears filled his eyes. The pillow trembled in his small hands. Julia's voice cut through the awkward silence like a blade of ice. You're not part of this family. Neither of you are. You were never supposed to be here. I felt Liam stiffen against me as my heart thundered painfully in my chest. My arms instinctively tightened around his shoulders as rage and shock coursed through my body. What are you saying? I demanded, my voice rising despite my attempts to control it. Julia turned to our parents, her perfectly painted lips curling in malicious satisfaction. Mom, Dad, tell her the truth already. She deserves to know after all these years, don't you think? My parents, the people who had raised me, went deathly pale. Mom's face contorted with obvious guilt, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide her distress. And then she started to cry, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. Erica, my father began hesitantly, his voice unusually fragile, but before he could continue, a commanding female voice echoed from the entrance of the church. She's right. You were never part of this family. Everyone turned toward the voice. A tall, elegant woman around 60, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal pantsuit, stood at the church entrance. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and her olive complexion and familiar eyes sent a shock of recognition through me. It was like looking at an older, refined version of my own face. Who do you think you are? Julia demanded, her voice sharp with irritation and embarrassment as whispers rippled through the wedding guests. The woman didn't flinch. She walked forward with measured, confident steps, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her piercing gaze never left my face, as though everyone else had faded into insignificance. My name is Vivian Rose, she said, her voice rich and commanding. And Erica is my daughter. A stunned silence fell over the church. Caroline swayed dramatically on her designer heels before collapsing into a nearby pew with a theatrical gasp. My father, the man I had believed was my father, went pale as a ghost, his hands trembling visibly as he reached for the wall to steady himself. This is absolutely ridiculous. Julia shrieked, her voice rising in hysteria as her perfect day crumbled around her. Her veil quivered with each angry word. You're completely ruining my wedding. Security. But Vivian Rose remained perfectly composed amidst the chaos she'd created. She strode toward us with purpose, the crowd parting before her like water. From her leather portfolio, she pulled out a sealed envelope. I have DNA test results, legal documents, and medical records that prove everything. I have the full story they've hidden from you for 35 years. Liam squeezed my hand, his small fingers gripping mine with surprising strength. Mom, he whispered, his eyes wide with confusion and wonder, who is that pretty lady? She looks like you. Before I could form any response, Caroline suddenly recovered from her fainting spell, letting out a strangled cry as she lurched to her feet. "You have absolutely no right to be here," she screamed, mascara streaking down her reddened face. Vivian's expression hardened, her eyes turning to ice. My head was spinning, the church seeming to tilt around me. "Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere private," Vivian suggested, a hint of gentleness breaking through her formidable exterior as she looked at my obvious distress. "No," Julia snapped, stepping between us. Her carefully curated composure had completely shattered. "This is my wedding. I want you and your so-called daughter to leave now. Take that retarded boy with you." Vivian turned her gaze on Julia, and for the first time, I saw real fear flash across my sister-in-law's face as she unconsciously took a step back. "Miss," Vivian said evenly, each word precise as a surgeon's cut, "I am the CEO and majority shareholder of Oakwood Group. Your future father-in-law's investment firm manages several of my company's pension funds. Are you absolutely certain you want me to leave?" Matthew's parents turned deathly pale. Diane's hand flew to her throat in shock. You're Vivian Rose," she whispered, recognition dawning in her horrified eyes. "Of Oakwood International?" Vivian ignored the stunned wedding party and focused entirely on me, her expression softening. "Erica," she said gently, her voice warm with emotion, "I know this is completely overwhelming, but your biological father, my late husband Alexander, would have wanted you to know the truth today." My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. "I don't want to hear any of this," I said, my voice breaking as I reached for Liam's hand. "Let's go, sweetheart. We don't need this." "Wait." Vivian quickly pulled out a worn photograph from her leather portfolio and held it out to me, her hand trembling slightly. "Please, just look at this. Just one moment." I hesitated, then reluctantly took it. The image showed a handsome man with gentle eyes and the same curly hair and warm olive skin that matched mine. He was holding a newborn baby, looking down with pure adoration. My breath caught in my throat. It was undeniably me, and the resemblance between us was striking. It felt like looking at a male version of myself. "Your father died," Vivian explained, her composed voice finally cracking with emotion. "Then at the hospital where I took you for a routine checkup, there was a terrible mistake. They switched you with another baby." Her voice trembled. "I raised their biological daughter for 2 years, believing she was mine, until she developed a rare genetic condition that killed her. That's when I discovered the truth through blood tests." Caroline was openly sobbing now. "We were desperate. We deserved a child too." Vivian's eyes flashed with decades of contained fury. "So you stole my daughter? You raised her to believe she didn't belong anywhere?" The church was filled with shocked gasps and hushed whispers. The elegant wedding had disintegrated into a full-blown scandal as guests pulled out phones, undoubtedly sharing the drama in real time. Liam tugged at my sleeve, his face surprisingly calm amidst the chaos. "Mom, she's like us, isn't she?" he whispered with unexpected wisdom. "She was searching for you, just like you're always protecting me when people are mean." His simple words hit me like a revelation. I looked at the family that had raised me, the family that had always made me feel different, inadequate, less than. Then I looked at Vivian, whose eyes reflected mine, whose features matched mine, whose determination I recognized in myself. I exhaled sharply, suddenly feeling lighter. "Let's go." Julia let out a bitter, brittle laugh. "Of course. Just run away. You and your defective little boy never belonged here anyway." I turned to face her one last time, my voice perfectly steady. "You're right, Julia. I was never part of this family." I glanced down at Liam and smiled, taking his hand firmly in mine. "And I thank God every day for that blessing." Vivian took us to a private dining room at an elegant restaurant, where Liam immediately warmed up to her. He was bubbling with curiosity, peppering her with questions between enthusiastic spoonfuls of his hot fudge sundae, his earlier distress forgotten. "So does this mean you're my grandma for real?" he asked, chocolate sauce smeared adorably around his mouth, his eyes wide with excitement. Vivian smiled warmly, glancing at me for permission. "If your mother agrees, I would be honored to be your grandmother, Liam." I took a deep breath, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. "I need to know everything," I said firmly. "From the very beginning. No more secrets." Vivian nodded and pulled a leather-bound photo album from her portfolio. "Your father, Alexander, was a brilliant architect," she began, her voice tender with memory. "We met when his firm was hired to design the headquarters for Oakwood Group. I was a young CEO with something to prove, and he was this passionate creative who saw beauty where others saw function. It was love at first sight, despite our differences." My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, staring at pictures of a vibrant couple traveling the world, him with his curly hair and warm smile, her with her determined eyes and elegant posture. They were dancing in Paris, hiking in Peru, laughing on beaches. They looked so completely in love, so full of life and plans. "When we found out I was pregnant with you, it was the happiest moment of our lives," Vivian continued, her voice growing thick with emotion. "Alexander designed our dream home while I prepared for your arrival. But then he died suddenly of an aortic aneurysm when I was 7 months pregnant. I was devastated but determined to raise you as he would have wanted." She paused, visibly struggling with the next part. "Then came the hospital mistake. A terrible, unforgivable error." Her composed facade cracked slightly. "Caroline and her husband had a baby girl in the same hospital around the same time. Their previous child had died while in hospital care, and perhaps after discovering their baby's condition, someone switched the babies out of fear of their grief and following lawsuits." I gasped softly, the implications hitting me. "So I'm your biological daughter, but you raised." "I raised their biological daughter, believing she was mine," Vivian confirmed, pain flashing in her eyes. "She developed a rare genetic condition at age 2. When blood tests revealed she couldn't possibly be mine, I discovered the unthinkable truth through extensive investigation." Tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and unstoppable. "And the girl, she died?" Vivian nodded, her own eyes glistening. "Yes. By then, Caroline and her husband had fully bonded with you. I was devastated, losing a child twice, first you, then the little girl I'd raised as my own. I completely fell apart after her death," Vivian admitted, looking down at her hands. "I was lost in grief and rage. Caroline and her husband used my vulnerability against me. Their lawyers convinced me that disrupting your life after you'd already bonded with them would traumatize you irrevocably. Caroline already had Julia, but she'd had complications that prevented more children," Vivian continued. "She convinced me that what she really wanted was to give Julia a sister, someone to grow up with. She claimed you needed stability, not a grieving, working mother. I was too broken to fight them properly. I signed the agreement, believing I was doing what was best for you." I clenched my fists, anger rising through my confusion. "Why did you wait so long to find me?" "The legal agreement I signed in my moment of weakness stated that I couldn't contact you until you turned 35, she said bitterly. "For nearly 35 years, I've been gathering evidence, building my company into something that could protect you, and most importantly, watching over you from a distance." A chill ran down my spine. "You've been watching me? All this time?" Vivian nodded solemnly. "I was at your college graduation, sitting in the back row. When Liam was born and your husband abandoned you both, I hired people to ensure you had support available if you needed it. And when you opened your little bookstore last year, I was your mysterious investor, though you never saw my face." Liam gasped, forgetting his chocolate ice cream completely. Wait, is she the lady who sends those special books for me with the dinosaur bookmarks? Vivian smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners just like mine. That was me. I couldn't be in your lives, but I needed to be part of them somehow. I stared at her, the puzzle pieces of my life rearranging themselves in a kaleidoscope of new understanding. Wait a minute, I murmured, a memory suddenly surfacing. The loan for the bookstore, the bank approved it in one day when they told me it would take weeks. Vivian gave a guilty nod, a hint of a smile playing across her lips. Your business plan was excellent on its own, but I may have expedited the approval process through some of my banking connections. My phone vibrated incessantly in my purse, a flood of calls and messages from Caroline and my adoptive family. I deliberately ignored them, focusing instead on the woman across from me. What happens now? I asked, feeling both terrified and strangely liberated. Vivian set her coffee cup down carefully. That's entirely up to you, she replied, her voice gentle but resolute. Legally, you are my daughter and my heir. Oakwood Group will be yours someday. But far more importantly, I want the chance to be the mother I should have been, and to be Liam's grandmother, if you'll allow it. Do I have to decide everything right now? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of the changes happening in my life in a single day. Of course not. Take all the time you need, she assured me. I've waited 35 years, I can certainly be patient a while longer. She hesitated, then reached into her portfolio again, her fingers lingering for a moment before carefully extracting another sealed envelope. Her voice softened, becoming almost reverent. Your father left this for you, she said gently, emotion making her composed voice waver. Alexander wrote this letter when I was 7 months pregnant. He had a family history of heart problems and sometimes worried he wouldn't be around to see you grow up. He brushed it off as needless anxiety at the time, but something compelled him to write this, just in case. Her eyes grew distant with memory. Vivian's hands trembled slightly as she continued, the weight of decades making her voice crack with raw emotion. I remember how he looked that night, sitting at his drafting table instead of working on his designs, writing this letter to a child he hadn't even met yet. He was terrified of not being there for you, of missing your life. I promised him I would make sure you knew how deeply you were loved, that I would be enough for both of us. She paused, taking a deep breath as if the memories were physically painful. When they told me the baby I was raising wasn't actually mine, when I discovered what had happened to you, the guilt crushed me. I'd failed him. I'd failed you. I hadn't kept my promise to either of you. Her voice softened, becoming almost a whisper. I've spent 35 years trying to find a way back to you, trying to honor the promise I made to him while respecting the legal agreement that kept us apart. I built my company into something that could protect you, that could give you everything he would have wanted for you. I never stopped fighting to find a way back to you. With hands that wouldn't stop trembling, I opened the envelope. The paper inside had yellowed slightly with age, the handwriting bold and flowing. The words seemed to leap off the page with warmth and emotion. My dearest Erica. If you're reading this letter, it means I didn't get to stay with you as I'd hoped. I pray that I was wrong, that this fear was just the anxiety of a new father, that I live to see you grow into the incredible person I know you will become. But something tells me I should leave these words for you, just in case. From the moment we learned you were coming into our lives, you became the center of my universe. Every blueprint I've drafted since then, I've done with you in mind, imagining you growing up in the spaces I create, seeing the world through your eyes. Your mother is the strongest person I've ever known. I know she loves you fiercely and completely, though sometimes her strength might seem like distance. If I'm gone, please forgive her if she struggles to find her way. Love, when it runs as deep as hers does, doesn't always know how to express itself. It gets tangled in grief, lost in protection, hidden in the spaces where it's too painful to reach. True love makes us do foolish things, retreat when we should advance, protect when we should connect, but her love for me, for you, has always been the most real thing in this world. As my final wish, I want you to have something that carries a piece of my heart, the house I designed when we learned you were coming. It was the most important project of my career, not because of its architecture, but because it was meant to be your home, the place where you would grow and learn and dream. It belongs to you now. Live a beautiful life there, Erica. Fill it with books and art and music and laughter. Create a home for yourself and those you love, and never, not for a single moment, doubt that you were loved beyond measure even before you took your first breath. With all my heart, Dad. Inside the envelope was a key, heavy and cool against my palm. Behind it was another document, its weight somehow greater than the paper it was printed on, the deed to a house I'd never seen but that had been waiting for me all along. Vivian's voice was thick with emotion as she spoke. "This is the home Alexander designed specifically for our family," she said. "I've maintained it exactly as he left it, waiting for the day when you would finally come home." A week later, Liam and I moved in. The house was stunning, warm, filled with light, with wide doorways and an open layout that seemed to welcome exploration. Vivian helped us transition, giving us space to adjust while making sure we knew she was there if we needed anything. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. My adoptive family made repeated attempts to contact me in the days following the wedding fiasco, dozens of missed calls, unread text messages, voicemails alternating between angry demands, guilt-inducing pleas, and awkward apologies. I ignored them all, focusing instead on helping Liam settle into our new home and life. But Julia, she wasn't one to accept defeat gracefully. One quiet Tuesday afternoon, while I was restocking shelves in my bookstore, arranging a new children's section for Liam's reading group, the door burst open with an angry jingle of bells. Julia marched in, her designer heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor, her expression a volatile mix of frustration and barely contained rage. "You owe me an explanation," she snapped, storming toward the counter where I was organizing a display of diverse children's books. I didn't even look up from my task. "For what, exactly?" My voice was calm, steady in a way it had never been around her before. "For completely ruining my wedding," she spat, slamming her manicured hands down on the counter, causing several books to topple over. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I raised an eyebrow, finally meeting her gaze. "The wedding still happened, didn't it?" Julia's mouth tightened into a thin line. "Yes," she admitted, her voice bitter and cold. "But not the way it was supposed to be. Matthew's parents are absolutely livid. Do you have any idea what you've done? They've lost 3 major investment accounts with Oakwood Group. His father might lose his partnership position, and they're blaming me for everything that happened." I sighed quietly and carefully placed another children's book on the display shelf, making sure the diverse faces on the covers were prominently visible. "That's not my problem, Julia." Her eyes flashed with genuine anger. "You are my sister." That made me pause. I straightened up and finally met her gaze directly, my voice calm but firm. "No, Julia. You never allowed me to be." Something in her perfectly composed expression wavered, just for a heartbeat, a flicker of something that might have been regret or even understanding. But her pride quickly crushed whatever vulnerability had momentarily surfaced. Instead, she scoffed dramatically, tossed her hair, and spun on her expensive heels, storming out with the door slamming violently behind her. I watched her go, surprised to find I felt nothing but a peaceful sense of closure. For the first time in my life, I was completely free from their expectations, their constant judgment, their conditional acceptance that never quite included Liam or me. And I didn't regret it for a second. 6 months later, life has settled into a rhythm I never thought possible for us. Liam has absolutely flourished in ways that take my breath away. He adores his grandmother Vivian, and the feeling is clearly mutual. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Vivian picks him up from his art therapy class, helps him with his speech exercises, and spoils him with the kind of unconditional love I always wanted for him. Just last week, she converted an entire room in the house into an art studio for Liam, complete with special adaptive equipment and materials that accommodate his motor skills. "Grandma, it's amazing!" Liam had gasped, his face lighting up with pure joy as he explored the easels and paints, his fingers immediately reaching for the specially designed brushes. "A true artist needs proper tools to express his creativity," Vivian said with a tender smile, watching with obvious pride as Liam experimented with mixing colors on his palette. Their bond is effortless and natural, as if they've known each other forever. The way they interact, heads bent together over an art project, sharing private jokes, her patience with his challenges, it fills my heart to overflowing. As for Vivian and me, we're building our relationship carefully, day by day. We meet for coffee at my bookstore, for dinners at the house, for long walks through the neighborhood where she tells me stories about Alexander, the father I never had the chance to know. Through her words, I can almost see him, a brilliant, passionate architect who sketched building designs on any available surface, who loved dark roast coffee and classical jazz, who would whistle Gershwin tunes while working late into the night on his drafting table. He was real, not just a name I never knew, not just a stranger in a faded photograph. He lived, he created, he loved, and he left a legacy for me in every wall and window of this house. The home he designed, the one he never got to see me grow up in, has become our sanctuary. Sometimes, when the house is quiet after Liam has gone to bed, I trace my fingers along the thoughtfully placed windows that catch the morning light perfectly, the custom-built shelves now filled with our books, the wider-than-standard doorways that now accommodate Liam's occasional mobility issues on harder days. Alexander designed this house for a family he dreamed of, but never met, yet somehow it fits us perfectly. New photographs now line the hallway walls, telling our story across time, Alexander holding a newborn in that hospital photo, me years later holding Liam, and now Liam painting alongside his grandmother, their matching profiles bent in concentration. 3 generations, connected despite everything that tried to keep us apart. Sometimes, the family that finds us against all odds is more real than the one we thought we belonged to. Liam taught me that when he came into my life, and now, reconnecting with my mother and discovering my father through her memories, I understand it completely. As Liam says with his simple wisdom, family is people who love you even when it's hard. And after 35 years of feeling like I didn't quite fit anywhere, I finally know exactly what that means. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.